What is going on, guys? Welcome back to Commentary 41. Like my sponsor, Steel Supplements. Link and discount code down in the description. You also know I'm a Weeble preferred influencer. Last month, over 100 people took advantage of the promotion. I promise you this month, it's just as good. All you have to do, go open an account. They're going to give you free stock. If you deposit even a single dollar, they are going to give you more free stock. And I want to cover a little bit of Maximum Football. This is something I initially overlooked, but one of the most intriguing aspects of this game. And I also want to start by saying, not something being sold as a feature, not something being sold as a program, not something being sold as an exclusive, but rather just going out and making a realistic football game. I've long said that when you're making a realistic football game, you don't have to rely on gimmicks. You don't need superstars. You don't need special abilities. All you need is football to be represented, and the rest will figure itself out. The reality is, when I got to watch Peyton Manning, Marvin Harrison, the chemistry was there. And it wasn't there because Peyton Manning had an X Factor engaged. It wasn't there because Marvin Harrison had a route got engaged. It was because they had chemistry together. Marvin Harrison was an immaculate route runner, and Peyton Manning was an accurate quarterback. They were on the same page nearly all of the time, and even though Peyton did go on to have success with other tight ends and wide receivers, it never really matched the magic that he had with Marvin Harrison. Now, that's something that is very difficult to program. It's something very difficult to put into a video game. But when you look at what Maximum Football is attempting to do, it makes it possible. And this, to me, is even more impressive when you think about a game that's really only to be designed for players to run a max of maybe 4 to 6 years. So they have set the ability for a receiver to run tons of route variations. Now, when you look at this at first glance, you may say, well, those are just a couple strides off each other. Those are just a couple feet different in depth. But this is something that is so important to replicating the sport of football. We've talked about this at length so many times when it comes to other games. You really can't run the same exact route over and over and over and not expect some type of deviation. When you have this type of deviation, what it brings is the ability for a slot receiver to run a route different than a number 1 or number 2. It most importantly allows a player to come in the game fresh and run a route crisper than the player that was just in. It allows you to build a rapport with a player that you may notice begins to cut early or cut late. It may affect the timing of a pass, most importantly for the offense or the defense. These are the little nuances that make football spectacular. From there, they go on and they talk about how the halfback will read and react and adjust in a similar mindset, constantly going out and scanning, looking for obstacles so that they can watch and understand what is going on in the field. And again, this is not something easy to do. This is something I know David Winter worked very hard on. And if the core programming he built off of is still there, then by all means, this can be a really good AI system because David, a lot of people I think might forget, was at EA for a long time. Worked on games with EA for a very long time and was an extremely capable and competent programmer. You also have a game right now that only has really one developer of code being written over it. To me, that's the biggest problem other games have. When you look at the code that Madden has right now, it's more than likely been written over by thousands, if not tens of thousands of people. That's just the cycle of a game being this old. So many people have made adjustments, so many people have touched it that we get the issues that we see so blatantly. You try to fix one thing, you break 5 other things. You fix those 5 things, you fault something to the point that it doesn't work anymore. Those are the issues that create problems within franchise mode saves, game saves, the ability to, render every helmet on the field. That's why we can look at things that games have done in the past that are unable to do now. So it's very important when we look at a game that is very, very new in its coding, but also very proper in its coding. That means that the people at Modus, they're not digging back over layer and layer and layer of code that's written by, let's say, 5, 6, 7, 8 people being this new. They're looking at a single writer of code, and they're making adjustments to that line of code. In some cases, they may be the only person working on one specific thing, and that makes not only getting it right, but getting it fixed so much easier. And that's why I've said, if you're on the fence with this game, it is a free game. You have no excuse. Free is the easiest price to pay. Free makes everything better to some regard. If you play this game and you don't like it, understand that you have a much greater ability to make an impact on this game by showing the things you don't like, talking about the things you want fixed, than you most likely will with a game like Madden that's made by a AAA company, a huge developer, and in all reality has people that work on the game that are forward-facing to the customer that don't actually program the game. One of the reasons that Clint gets so much heat in this community is because he comes out and champions these changes, but he is not the one programming them. He is merely a gameplay designer. You can design the game to be the best in the world, but if you can't get it into the programming, we as gamers can't play that vision that you have. And ultimately, that is what causes the disconnect between the gamer, the creator, and the actual gameplay. That is where Maximum Football is in a very unique position to thrive. Not only are they listening to feedback that we're giving them on their game, they're listening to feedback we've given them from other games, and they more than likely have the ability to go out and make changes that we can actually see. So if you can get a game right now to replicate a difference in players, which is something we've pined for years, one of the biggest issues with most sports games is you really can't distinguish between the best, the better, the average player. The bad and the poor players, they always show up. The bad angles, the poor tackling numbers, those always show up. The player that can't catch, the player that doesn't have speed. But show me the player that can run a route crisp, clean, that can come out of a break faster, that can actually hit full stride faster. That is what is going to make the difference when you play a game like this, if they really are going through and programming it this way. Show me the difference between a halfback that hits the hole a half second sooner because his vision is better. Not just because he has numerical vision, not just because he shifted through another player, not just because the defensive tackle shifted back into a block, but a halfback that actually had the AI logic to think faster than another player, because ultimately that's all this comes down to. They're not little men on the field. It's just programming, the game code, the logic, and in some cases the delays to help distinguish between the great and the good players. Once you have that in place, you can go out and make great players. Barry Sanders was not great due to attributes. Deion Sanders was not great due to attributes. Just as I said, Peyton Manning to Marvin Harrison were not great based on any specific number. That is what needs to be replicated in a football game to get simulation. And when I see things like this, it lets me know that Maximum Football is willing to step in those directions. Love to know your guys' thoughts on this. Appreciate you watching this video. And you know, when a game is working this hard to bring us simulation football, there is no way I will not be able to be back in the week with more commentary.